At the heart of this story lies Leah Harper, a 12-year-old girl who inhabits the shadows of a middle-class family in a quiet southern town. Leah is the youngest of 3 children, a position that often left her feeling overlooked and unimportant. Her older brother Alex embodies the ideal child, a talented athlete admired by coaches and teachers alike, who easily commands the attention of their parents and peers. Alex's successes seem to define the family's pride, casting a long shadow over Leah's quieter presence. Her sister Maddie, on the other hand, moves through life with an unmistakable energy, rebellious, charismatic, and fiercely independent. Maddie's vibrant personality demands recognition, and her ability to captivate any room contrasts sharply with Leah's withdrawn nature. Unlike her siblings, Leah is enveloped in silence. She is a child of few words, often retreating into herself, struggling to articulate the complex emotions that churn beneath her calm exterior. Her parents rarely notice her silences as anything more than shyness or fragility. Caroline, their mother, is a dedicated physician whose demanding career leaves her emotionally and physically drained. She views Leah as delicate and in need of constant protection, but fails to perceive the undercurrents of resentment and isolation that gather inside the girl's heart. Caroline's protective gestures, though well-intentioned, feel to Leah like barriers that separate her further from real connection, rather than bridges that might help her be seen. Marcus, the father, is a man consumed by his business ventures. His long hours and frequent travel leave him distant and disconnected from his children's inner worlds. He is often absent when Leah needs him most, his exhaustion and preoccupation creating an invisible gulf. He doesn't ask about Leah's day, nor does he sense the storm gathering within her. His rare appearances at home are marked by quiet tension, not warmth. Leah senses his indifference, but cannot summon the courage to confront it. Instead, she withdraws deeper, resigning herself to being unseen and unheard. In school, Leah's invisibility extends beyond the family. She drifts through classrooms unnoticed, her presence unremarkable to teachers and classmates alike. She sits at the back of the room, avoids eye contact, and does not raise her hand. The other children neither exclude nor include her. She is simply there, like a ghost hovering on the periphery of their lives. Leah's social isolation is not born of fear or rejection, but rather a conscious choice. She has learned that to speak up is to invite scrutiny and disappointment. It is safer to remain silent, to disappear into the background and shield herself from the potential pain of being misunderstood or ignored. Leah's internal world, however, is anything but silent. It is filled with swirling emotions, confusion, anger, sadness, that she has neither the words nor the means to express. She longs to be acknowledged, not for her accomplishments or personality, but for the pain she carries and the loneliness that has become a constant companion. Her isolation sharpens a bitter edge within her, a simmering resentment at the way her family sees her as a fragile afterthought rather than a person with depth and need. This resentment, hidden beneath layers of silence, grows with each passing day, feeding on the neglect and misunderstanding that define her relationships. Her bedroom is a sanctuary of quiet contemplation. There, Leah allows herself fleeting moments of vulnerability, staring out the window at the night sky, imagining a world where she is seen and heard. She holds on to small objects, an old photograph, a worn doll, that anchor her to a sense of identity amid the chaos of her emotions. Yet these objects also remind her of what is missing: genuine connection, understanding, and love. Despite her youth, Leah possesses an acute awareness of the dynamics within her family. She observes the interactions between her parents and siblings with a detached clarity. She sees the preferential treatment Alex receives and the grudging tolerance shown to Maddie's rebelliousness. She understands that her silence is both a cause and consequence of her invisibility. It protects her from further hurt, but also deepens her alienation. This quiet suffering is compounded by the unspoken rules of her family and community. Emotions are to be controlled, vulnerabilities hidden, and appearances maintained. Expressing anger or sadness is seen as weakness, especially in a household striving to project strength and success. Leah internalizes these expectations, learning to mask her pain behind a calm facade. The weight of these unexpressed feelings accumulates, forging within her a resolve that is cold and unwavering. The stark contrast between Leah and her siblings underscores a profound loneliness. While Alex thrives on attention and Maddie rebels to be noticed, Leah chooses invisibility, believing it is the only way to survive. Yet this survival strategy carries its own dangers, nurturing a growing void that threatens to consume her from within. Leah's story is one of a child caught in the intersections of neglect, misunderstanding, and silent despair. It is a portrait of the invisible wounds carried by those who exist on the edges of families and communities, unseen and unheard. Her internal struggle reflects a universal human need: to be recognized, to matter, and to break free from the silence that confines. In this small southern town, where life is measured by quiet routines and unspoken expectations, Leah Harper's silence speaks volumes. It is a silent scream for help, a quiet rebellion against invisibility, and a prelude to the tragic events that will unfold. A haunting reminder that sometimes the most profound stories lie hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be told. Despite the calm exterior that Leah presented to the world, beneath the surface she was a tempest of conflicting emotions. The quietness that surrounded her was not born from contentment or peace, but from a deep, gnawing sense of alienation that seemed to grow with each passing day. At school, Leah was nearly invisible. She did not actively seek friendships, nor did she engage with her classmates beyond what was necessary. Instead, she retreated into the safe confines of solitude and books. These silent companions offered her a refuge from the world that so often ignored her existence. In the pages of stories and the worlds crafted by others, Leah found a temporary solace, a place where she could observe life without being part of its relentless, sometimes cruel currents. At home, the environment was no less isolating. The heavy weight of expectations and the unsaid demands stifled her voice. Leah felt unheard, as though her true self was trapped behind a barrier of silence imposed by a family that valued appearances and success over understanding and emotional connection. Conversations passed over her like background noise, and her own thoughts remained locked away, unshared and unseen. Her silence was not simply a symptom of shyness or passivity, but a defense mechanism, a protective shield against a world that repeatedly dismissed her needs and feelings. This growing disconnect between Leah and those around her nurtured a deep internal anger and disappointment. At first, these feelings simmered quietly, restrained beneath the surface like a slowly boiling pot. But over time, they hardened into something more resolute, a cold alienation that permeated her every thought. Leah no longer sought to engage with the world around her. Instead, she turned inward, constructing an invisible wall to guard the fragile core of her identity. This barrier was both a sanctuary and a prison. It protected her from further pain, but also isolated her from the possibility of healing or connection. Within this fortress of solitude, Leah became a keen observer of life rather than an active participant. She studied her family meticulously, noticing the nuances of their interactions, their strengths and vulnerabilities, their fears and frustrations. Each glance, every word unspoken, was cataloged and analyzed in her mind. Leah saw how her brother Alex commanded attention effortlessly, how her sister Maddie navigated relationships with a fiery independence, and how her parents seemed distant, caught up in their own worlds. Through this detached observation, Leah was not merely escaping, she was preparing herself. She was developing a survival strategy, a way to navigate a reality that felt overwhelmingly hostile and indifferent. This psychological preparation was complex and layered. Leah's retreat was not a simple withdrawal, but an active process of learning and adaptation. She honed her ability to read people, to anticipate reactions, and manipulate circumstances subtly. Her solitude sharpened her awareness, enabling her to predict the emotional currents beneath the surface of her family's interactions. She became attuned to the fragile balance of power and control that governed their household, recognizing where cracks might appear and how to exploit or avoid them. Leah's internal world became a landscape of cold calculation intertwined with raw emotion. Beneath her calm facade lay a mind working tirelessly to make sense of her pain and to find a means of reclaiming agency. This was not the wild, impulsive rage of a child, but a slow-burning determination forged by years of neglect and misunderstanding. It was the formation of a plan, not necessarily conscious at first, to change her circumstances, to assert control in a life that had long rendered her powerless. The complexity of Leah's experience underscores the profound impact of emotional neglect and isolation on a young mind. Her journey was not merely about enduring hardship, but about transforming suffering into a force that could shape her destiny. The invisible walls she built were more than barriers. They were the framework of resilience and empowerment born from the need to survive in an environment that refused to nurture her. Leah's silent rebellion was a testament to the human capacity for adaptation in the face of abandonment. While her family remained unaware of the storm brewing within her, Leah's mind was actively rewriting the narrative of her life. She was no longer content to be a passive observer. She sought to become the author of her own story, even if it meant embracing darkness and solitude as her ally. This deep psychological transformation was a pivotal chapter in Leah's life, marking the shift from victimhood to agency, from invisibility to a fierce determination to be acknowledged. It was the crucible in which her resolve was forged, setting the stage for the dramatic and tragic events that would later unfold. Her experience reveals how unspoken pain can evolve into a powerful force, shaping not only the individual, but also the lives of those around her. In the quiet corners of her room, Leah contemplated her place in the world, wrestling with feelings of anger, abandonment, and the desperate need for recognition. The books she once sought for escape now served as blueprints for understanding human behavior and psychology. She absorbed knowledge not for academic achievement, but as a means of self-protection and empowerment. Her gaze, once vacant and distant, grew sharper, more focused, reflecting the fierce intelligence and determination that lay beneath. Leah's transformation was both tragic and hauntingly beautiful in its complexity. It spoke to the hidden struggles of countless children whose pain goes unnoticed, whose voices are drowned in the cacophony of family dysfunction and societal neglect. Her story is a stark reminder that silence can conceal profound turmoil, and that those who withdraw are often preparing themselves for battles unseen. Ultimately, Leah's inner journey was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, even when forged in the coldest crucibles of neglect. Her quiet strength, born of alienation and misunderstood emotions, shaped the course of her life and left an indelible mark on the world around her. Leah's attention grew increasingly sharp and focused, shifting toward the smallest, most overlooked details of her environment that, to her, held the potential for control and power. Where others saw merely everyday objects, locks on doors, the old ventilation systems, the daily comings and goings of family members, Leah perceived a map of opportunity. She meticulously observed the routines of her household, when her parents left for work, when her siblings retreated to their rooms, and the precise moments when the house felt most vulnerable to disruption. Every pattern, every habit was mentally logged and analyzed. Among these details, a forgotten gas cylinder in the utility room captured her attention more than anything else. It stood in a shadowy corner, neglected and dusty, connected to a dated heating system that rarely saw use. The cylinder was old, with faded markings, and a worn valve that suggested years of inactivity. To most, it was simply part of the background, a relic from a forgotten past. To Leah, however, it represented something far more significant, a mechanism that could give her unprecedented control over the space she inhabited and over the people who had long ignored her presence. Driven by a growing resolve, Leah began to study the nature of gas and its behavior, sourcing information from the vast expanse of the internet. She consumed articles, videos, and technical manuals, absorbing everything she could about how gas leaks occur, how gas diffuses through air, and the subtle dangers that invisible toxins pose. This knowledge was not academic for her. It was practical, essential. Each new fact fed her growing confidence and clarified the parameters of what she was planning. Her secret practice sessions became rituals of precision. When the house was silent and the family was elsewhere, Leah would slip quietly into the utility room. With deliberate care, she would turn the valve on the cylinder just enough to release a small amount of gas without attracting attention. She watched intently as the invisible gas began to seep into the air, learning to gauge how quickly it spread, how long it took for the air to grow heavy, and how subtle the warning signs could be. She timed the process meticulously, building a mental clock of every second. This was no careless experimentation. Each action was calculated, rehearsed repeatedly to avoid mistakes. To maintain secrecy and avoid suspicion, Leah gathered small items, paper clips, bits of paper, an old lighter emptied of its fuel, a piece of cardboard with a hole carefully cut into it where she inserted a screw. To an observer, these might seem like mere child's play or forgotten toys, but to Leah they were instruments of distraction and concealment. She planned every detail of her operation, understanding that success depended on flawless execution and remaining undetected until the critical moment. Her movements were measured and methodical, devoid of haste or impulsivity. The cold determination within her guided each step, steadying her nerves and sharpening her focus. The girl who once seemed fragile and overlooked had transformed into a silent strategist, mastering the art of invisibility while simultaneously preparing to exert an irreversible influence over her world. She practiced opening doors, manipulating locks, and navigating the house with the precision of someone well acquainted with the layout and its vulnerabilities. Despite her youth, Leah's plan reflected the weight of many sleepless nights, filled with reflection, anger, and resolve. This was no impulsive act born of childish frustration. It was the culmination of years of neglect and silent suffering, crystallized into a single purpose. Her mind, once clouded by confusion and loneliness, now functioned with a sharp clarity, free from hesitation. She had become the architect of her own fate, quietly building the means to reclaim a voice that had long been denied. The intricacies of Leah's preparations also revealed a disturbing maturity. She understood that control was not only about the physical act, but about shaping perceptions and outcomes. She anticipated the reactions of her family members, their movements, and their vulnerabilities. She imagined the silence that would follow, the heaviness in the air, and the irrevocable change her actions would unleash. The scope of her plan was precise. It was meant to stop the cycle of invisibility and neglect once and for all. Her careful study of the gas cylinder and its connected systems was symbolic of her broader journey, learning to navigate the unseen forces around her, to create a space where she could command attention. The cylinder's age and obscurity mirrored her own feelings of being forgotten, but also hinted at a hidden power waiting to be unleashed. By mastering the mechanics of the gas leak, Leah harnessed an invisible weapon, one that required patience, knowledge, and ruthless precision. The longer Leah prepared, the more she became enveloped by a quiet intensity. The boundaries between the innocent child and the calculated planner blurred. Her emotions, once tumultuous and raw, were tempered by cold logic and careful calculation. The act of preparation itself became a form of control, a way to transform helplessness into empowerment. Each small success in practice reinforced her belief that she could alter her reality, forcing those around her to finally acknowledge her existence, not through words or pleas, but through undeniable consequence. In the privacy of her room, Leah often replayed scenarios in her mind, refining her approach and mentally rehearsing each step. She visualized the timing, the dispersal of the gas, and the eventual outcome. The more she practiced, the less room there was for doubt or second-guessing. The plan was no longer a distant idea, but a concrete path forward. Leah's fixation on seemingly mundane objects, locks, valves, hoses, illustrated the transformation of her perception. Where others saw banal household items, she saw tools of liberation and power. This shift was profound. It marked her emergence from victimhood into a role where she could exert influence, however dark and tragic the method. Her childhood innocence was overshadowed by a relentless will to be seen and heard. Her actions were not impulsive, but the result of a strategic mind grappling with the consequences of years of neglect. The gas cylinder, the valve, the ventilation system, all became symbols of the control she sought to assert over her life and family. The careful planning spoke to a deeper psychological evolution, one where Leah moved beyond the pain of invisibility to craft a moment where she could no longer be ignored. Ultimately, Leah's meticulous preparations foreshadowed the irrevocable events that would soon unfold. The long hours spent studying, timing, and perfecting her plan were the foundation upon which her tragic assertion of agency would be built. This chapter of her story reveals a mind shaped by silence and suffering, yet determined to break free in a way that would leave a permanent mark. Her story serves as a chilling testament to the lengths one can go when pushed to the edges of invisibility and despair. Leah's quiet preparation, was the calm before the storm, a silent, calculated promise that the world would finally have to reckon with her presence. The morning dawned clear and cold, with the pale light filtering softly through the windows of the Harper household. Outside, the world was waking up in its usual, predictable way. Birds chirped faintly in the distance, and the air held the crispness of early spring. Inside the house, the atmosphere was indistinguishable from any other ordinary day. Caroline moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, preparing breakfast and organizing the day ahead. Marcus was already dressed for work, focused on the emails flooding his phone, while Alex and Maddie bickered softly from their rooms, their voices blending into the background hum of family life. Leah stood apart, quiet and still, observing the familiar routine with a detachment that belied her age. The house felt alive with movement, conversations overlapping and footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. Yet beneath this surface bustle, Leah carried with her a cold and resolute purpose, one that had been building for months, crystallizing into a singular moment of action. Her heart beat steadily, devoid of the fear and hesitation that might have gripped a child under such weighty circumstances. This was no impulsive outburst, but a measured step towards reclaiming control in a life that had long denied her presence. Leah moved silently through the hallways, avoiding the gaze of her family members as she made her way to the utility room, the nondescript space where the gas cylinder was kept, connected to the rarely used heating and ventilation system. The door creaked faintly as she opened it, but no one noticed. The house was full of distractions, and Leah had become an invisible shadow, accustomed to slipping through unnoticed. She approached the gas valve with practiced hands, steady and unshaking. The valve was stiff, but she had loosened it over the past weeks, and now it turned smoothly beneath her fingers. As the valve opened, a silent, invisible stream of gas began to escape into the piping, slowly infiltrating the living spaces beyond. The chemical scent was faint, almost imperceptible, a deceptive calm that belied the danger spreading through the air. Back in the kitchen, Caroline continued her preparations, humming softly as she chopped fruit and arranged plates. She was immersed in the sensory details of the morning, unaware of the growing threat that silently crept through the house. Marcus sat at the dining table, scrolling through work updates on his tablet, his attention divided between digital demands and the distant sounds of his family. Neither noticed the subtle shift in the air, the gradual thickening that would soon envelop them all. The gas flowed steadily, filling the rooms with its unseen presence. Leah retreated to a corner of the living room, folding her hands calmly in her lap as she watched the scene unfold. Her eyes remained open and alert, registering every small change, the slackening of muscles, the sluggish movements, the gradual fading of awareness in those around her. The house, once full of life and noise, grew quiet, the familiar sounds dissolving into an oppressive stillness. At first, the symptoms were subtle. Caroline paused, pressing a hand to her temple as a headache began to gnaw at her concentration. Marcus yawned and blinked slowly, his thoughts blurring as weakness crept into his limbs. Alex stumbled into the hallway, his usual energetic stride reduced to a faltering shuffle. Maddie slumped against the wall, eyes half closed, struggling to stay upright. The family members moved like puppets with their strings cut, their strength draining away with the poisoned air. No one screamed, no one cried out for help. There was no panic, no desperate struggle. Instead, the house seemed suspended in a dreamlike state, time stretching and slowing as consciousness ebbed from each body. The children's laughter and voices were replaced by soft gasps and faint coughs, signs of the body's futile attempt to resist the suffocating gas. Leah watched impassively, feeling a detached sense of control and inevitability. The rooms filled with a heavy, tangible silence that pressed upon every surface, wrapping the household in its final embrace. The ordinary morning had transformed into a tableau of tragedy, each moment a step closer to the irreversible end. The vibrant energy of life was replaced by stillness, as the invisible killer wove its deadly web throughout the house. As the last flicker of movement ceased, Leah remained seated, untouched by the haze that dulled the minds and hearts of her family. She was the calm eye of the storm, a quiet force amid the devastation. Her breathing was steady, her gaze clear and unwavering. The act that would forever alter her life and the lives of those around her was complete, and in that completion lay a complex blend of emotions, relief, sorrow, and the chilling satisfaction of having been seen at last. The house, once a place of warmth and connection, was now a silent monument to a terrible choice. The morning light cast long shadows through the empty rooms, illuminating the stillness with a cruel clarity. Outside, the world continued, unaware of the horror that had unfolded within these walls. Leah rose slowly from her seat, moving through the house with deliberate steps, careful not to disturb the scene she had created. She passed the tables still cluttered with the remnants of breakfast, the scattered toys and belongings left in abrupt abandonment. There were no notes, no explanations, no farewells. Only the lingering presence of loss and silence. At the stairwell window, Leah opened it wide, letting the cold morning air rush in, brushing against her face like a reminder of the world beyond. She paused briefly, taking in the vastness of the quiet neighborhood waking up around her, then stepped outside. The door clicked softly behind her, closing the chapter of a life that had long been defined by invisibility. The morning that began with such ordinary promise ended in a catastrophe that would haunt the community for years to come. Leah's actions, calm, calculated, and devastating, were the final expression of a child pushed beyond the brink by neglect, misunderstanding, and silent suffering. The house stood empty now, its walls heavy with grief and unanswered questions. A somber testament to the tragic power of a silent cry for recognition. The discovery of the tragedy sent shockwaves through the entire city, plunging the normally quiet community into a state of paralysis born of disbelief and fear. Residents, overwhelmed by the unimaginable loss and the eerie circumstances surrounding it, found themselves gripped by a haunting sense of helplessness. The vibrant rhythms of daily life ceased as the town collectively struggled to come to terms with the horrors that had unfolded within the Harper household. This was not merely a loss of lives. It was a rupture in the very fabric of the community's sense of safety and normalcy. Investigators arrived swiftly, their faces marked by the gravity of the task ahead. The scene was cordoned off meticulously, every inch of the house and its surroundings subjected to exhaustive scrutiny. Forensic teams combed through the rooms, looking for clues that might explain how such a catastrophe could have taken place without warning or resistance. They photographed every surface, collected samples of air and dust, and examined the ventilation systems and gas cylinders with an intensity fueled by desperation for answers. Despite the thoroughness of their efforts, the gas systems and associated equipment showed no signs of malfunction or accidental release. The cylinders appeared intact, the valves in their proper positions before the tragedy, and the ventilation systems functioning nominally according to technical diagnostics. It was as though the house had become a stage for a perfectly orchestrated event, designed to avoid detection and leave minimal physical evidence. This baffled the experts and deepened the mystery, making the tragedy seem less like a random accident and more like a calculated act. Compounding the confusion was the partial damage to the surveillance cameras. Several units had malfunctioned during the night, an occurrence initially attributed to technical faults or weather interference. However, the timing was suspiciously coincidental, as the footage from the crucial hours before and during the tragedy was missing entirely. Investigators speculated about tampering or intentional destruction, but no definitive proof emerged. The absence of visual evidence left critical gaps in the timeline, frustrating the team and fueling a growing sense of unease. Without those images, the true sequence of events remained obscured, allowing space for doubt and speculation to grow. The victim list was assembled with somber care, each name a reminder of the lives abruptly ended. The Harper family formed the core of the tragedy. Caroline, Marcus, Alex, Maddie, and others who had been present in the home that morning. The tally of lost souls reflected a devastating breadth of loss, ripping apart the hearts of relatives, neighbors, and the wider community. Yet, conspicuously absent from the list was Leah's name. Her body was nowhere to be found. Searches of the house and its immediate surroundings yielded no trace of her presence. Leah's room, in stark contrast to the scenes of chaos elsewhere, remained untouched, pristine and orderly as if frozen in time. The bed was made, belongings carefully arranged, and no sign of disturbance marred the space. Within a hidden compartment in Caroline's dresser, investigators found a short note, written in a child's handwriting but marked by an unsettling confidence. The single word inscribed on the scrap of paper was "Goodbye." This terse farewell carried the weight of finality and mystery, hinting at Leah's conscious departure and the magnitude of her actions. It suggested a farewell not only to her family, but to the life she had endured in silence and neglect. The local media quickly seized upon the chilling elements of the story. Headlines and reports painted Leah as "silence turned to horror," a phrase that captured the tragic transformation of a once invisible child into a catalyst for catastrophe. News outlets explored every angle of the tragedy, running interviews with devastated neighbors, expert analyses, and somber retrospectives on the Harper family. The narrative became one of a ghostly figure haunting the town, a spectral presence born from pain and invisibility who left an indelible mark on the community's collective consciousness. Whispers began to circulate through Elm Ridge and the surrounding areas, tales woven in hushed tones about the girl who vanished into the ether. Some spoke of her as a haunting spirit, a shadow lingering in the corners of homes and streets, watching silently with eyes that saw too much. Others speculated on her fate, whether she had fled to a distant place, lost in the vastness of the world, or whether something darker had claimed her after the event. The mystery of Leah's disappearance became a source of fear and fascination, a legend born from the unspeakable tragedy. Efforts to locate Leah were relentless yet fruitless. Law enforcement launched extensive searches across the region, deploying helicopters, search dogs, and ground teams scouring every possible hiding place. Missing person reports were circulated widely, and public appeals were made in hopes of uncovering any clue to her whereabouts. Yet no credible sightings or leads emerged. Leah seemed to have vanished without a trace, as if swallowed by the very silence she had once embodied. The lack of resolution only deepened the anguish of those left behind and intensified the ominous atmosphere enveloping the town. Families mourned the loss of loved ones, but the unanswered questions about Leah's fate became a haunting echo in every conversation. The tragedy lingered like a shadow cast long after the physical evidence had faded, a wound that refused to heal. Leah's disappearance became a symbol of the dangers hidden beneath the surface of neglect and isolation. Her story was told not only as a cautionary tale, but as a grim reflection on the failures of those around her to see and respond to the silent suffering of a child. It ignited debates about the responsibilities of family, community, and social institutions in recognizing and addressing the needs of vulnerable children before tragedy could unfold. Over time, the memory of Leah Harper evolved within the town's consciousness. She was no longer simply a missing girl. She had become an embodiment of the invisible pain that can lurk behind closed doors. The phrase, "silence turned to horror," became etched into the community's narrative, a stark reminder of the consequences when voices go unheard and cries for help are ignored. The tragedy also spurred changes in the community. Schools implemented new programs focused on mental health awareness and child protection. Local organizations increased efforts to support families in distress, hoping to prevent future losses born of neglect and misunderstanding. Yet beneath these efforts was a persistent undercurrent of sorrow and unresolved fear, a collective acknowledgement of a failure that had cost too much. In the wake of the disaster, the Harper family home was left abandoned, a somber relic of lives abruptly ended. The property was eventually boarded up, standing as a silent testament to the darkness that had invaded a once peaceful place. Passers-by often felt a chill near the site, a palpable sense of sorrow that seemed to seep from the walls. It was a place avoided by many, a haunted memory that lingered in the town streets. Local lore grew around Leah's disappearance, weaving myth and reality into a narrative that passed from one generation to the next. She was spoken of as a ghostly figure whose presence could still be felt, a silent guardian or restless spirit depending on who told the tale. Some believed she watched over the town, a tragic symbol of innocence lost and the urgent need for vigilance. Despite the passage of time, the unanswered questions surrounding Leah's fate continued to cast a long shadow. Investigators, families, and the community remained bound by a shared need to understand, to find closure that had so far eluded them. Leah Harper's story was not merely one of tragedy, but of the enduring impact of silence invisibility, and the desperate need to be seen. The city remained forever changed, marked by the memory of a tragedy that shattered not just a family, but the fragile sense of safety that had defined the town. Leah's disappearance became a haunting reminder of the depths of human pain and the critical importance of listening before silence turns to horror. Over time, the tragedy that unfolded within the Harper family grew far beyond the immediate sorrow of loss and disbelief. It transformed into a symbol, a dark legend etched deeply into the collective consciousness of the town. Leah Harper's story, once a stark and painful reality, evolved into a cautionary tale about the dangers of neglect, misunderstanding, and the fatal consequences of silence. The impact of what happened rippled through the community, altering the way people thought about the quiet children, those who lingered on the margins of attention, those whose pain was hidden beneath layers of withdrawal and invisibility. Before the tragedy, many had overlooked such children, dismissing their silence as shyness or simple indifference. These children were often invisible in classrooms and playgrounds, shadows in the corners of family gatherings, unheard in the din of daily life. Leah had been one of them, a ghostly presence, quietly absorbing the world without ever truly being seen. But her silence, once mistaken for meekness or fragility, was revealed as something far more profound and dangerous. It became a chilling reminder that beneath quietude can lie a tempest, one that, when unleashed, can shatter the very foundations of a community. In the years that followed, the town's attitude toward these quiet, overlooked children shifted noticeably. Teachers who had once allowed silence to pass unnoticed began to listen more carefully. They learned to observe subtle signs of distress and isolation that had previously been ignored. Vigilance increased not only within schools, but also among parents, neighbors, and community members. No longer did silence mean harmlessness. It was recognized as a potential cry for help, a symptom of deeper struggles demanding attention and compassion. New residents moving into the town were quietly cautioned about the lingering shadow of the Harper tragedy. Older inhabitants would warn, "There was something here, but don't ask questions." This phrase, spoken with a mix of fear and reverence, hinted at the unspoken grief and the mysterious absence that Leah's disappearance had left behind. The story was told in hushed tones, often accompanied by wary glances toward the abandoned Harper house or the quiet corners of the town where Leah had once been seen. Leah Harper's name gradually faded from everyday conversation, replaced by myths and whispered legends. She became less of a person and more of an idea, a spectral figure embodying the consequences of being unseen and unheard. Stories grew around her, some tinged with sorrow, others veering into the realm of the supernatural. She was said to roam the empty streets on moonless nights, a silent guardian or a restless spirit, reminding the town of the price of neglect. In this transformation, Leah became immortalized not as a victim, but as a warning, a symbol of the invisible suffering that can exist beneath the surface of any community. Though the specifics of the tragedy slipped from collective memory, the dates, the names, the precise details of that terrible morning, the essence remained vivid. The town never forgot how silence, once a refuge, could become a weapon more powerful than words. It was a cold, ruthless voice, one that demanded acknowledgement and change. Leah's silence was no longer just the absence of sound. It was a potent force compelling the living to face uncomfortable truths about empathy, attention, and responsibility. The lessons drawn from Leah's story echoed through the generations that followed. Parents were reminded to watch, not just for overt signs of distress, but also for the quieter signals, the withdrawn gaze, the reluctance to speak, the isolation that might seem insignificant but could harbor deep wounds. Teachers took on a renewed duty to engage with every child, recognizing that beneath the surface of calm could lie struggles requiring intervention and care. Leah's story served as a warning to those who might dismiss or overlook the silent among them. It cautioned that ignoring pain and loneliness is not a neutral act. It is one that can lead to irreversible consequences, rippling outward in ways no one could predict. The quiet child suffering, left unacknowledged, may culminate in outcomes that shatter families, communities, and lives. In this way, Leah's silence transcended its origins. It became a voice, clear and unyielding, cold but fair, challenging future generations to listen more deeply and act more compassionately. Her legacy was a somber reminder that silence can neither be ignored nor forgotten without risk. It is a call to attentiveness, an insistence that every child's pain matters, even when unspoken. The town of Elmridge, forever marked by what happened within the Harper household, embraced this difficult truth. While the memory of Leah Harper as a person softened with time, the symbolic weight of her story endured. It was woven into the fabric of the town's identity, shaping its approach to care, vigilance, and the power of listening. And for those who knew the story, whether told in classrooms, whispered on porches, or reflected upon in quiet moments, it remained a haunting reminder that to ignore the silent is to invite tragedy. Thus, Leah Harper's silence became more than absence. It became a voice echoing through the years, a force compelling awareness and action, reminding all that sometimes the most profound messages come not from noise, but from the quietest corners of the heart.